than it is on the gecko wheel. So you can have a lot more compliance in the wheel instead of having to create compliance in the mechanism. Are we still even streaming? Oof. Jeez. Okay, we are. Sorry about that, guys. So these work really well. We have our 8mm Rex plastic spacers. These are actually exactly the core out of the 48 or out of the 96 mil. Excuse me. These are actually the core out of the 72mm gecko wheel. So you can use them really easily to create intakes like this, where you've got spacers in between each wheel. So you can create intake systems like this and really easily stack up between each size. So, oh man, our stream totally restarted. It says we were done on Twitch.
It reset our drop frame.
Wow, okay. It's in the green now. Is it better?
Oh no, we're still in the red.
Oh no, we're still in the red? Okay.
Yeah, we're still in the red.
Cool. Maybe it'll be better for chat. I'm not sure. This one's the most frustrating because I don't know what we can do about it.
Yeah.
Like,
So currently our drop frame rate was sitting at almost 70%, and now we're down to 15. So it
okay.
might be better.
We might be reasonable now? No, not better. All right. Well, that's too bad. I suppose I'll get these chassis ready off stream. I was hoping for a nice opportunity.
We do need more entries in the giveaway, though. We've got 30 viewers and only 14 entries.
We need some more entries in the giveaway. Type !snake in the chat. Yes. Especially if there's a snake in your boot, specifically.
Yep, we don't want any snakes in your boots.
Yeah, that gets it out of your boots, I think. I really love the boot wheels. One of the fun parts about boot wheels is we had a concept when designing them before we went to go prototype boot wheels. And that was the idea that, can you switch to our second camera? The idea that if you spun the wheel with the toe of the wheel forward in this orientation, that if you pushed an element right up against a flat wall, it would kick that element up and over the wall. This is really nice for games like last year, Freight Frenzy, where you had blocks and balls that you might want just like a little ramp, and you want the ability for your intake to kick something up onto the ramp. So we said, okay, toe forward gets us the ability to kick something up over a ramp. Heel forward just pushes something linearly. So I said, okay, sure, that sounds fun. Maybe that'll work out in real life. Otherwise, it probably was going to act very similarly anyway. So we did it, and we started prototyping. And we found out that they actually do that. Like, I built an intake on a V-line, and I ran it against some blocks and balls, and when you put the toe forward, it kicked the blocks up over the channel, and when you ran the heel forward, it kept them down. So that was just such a great moment, because I was like, I really didn't expect that to work, but it totally does. Stream seems better now. All right, somebody stopped uploading Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I guess, or whatever was happening on our internet before. But I really like boot wheels. They're really fun. They give you really nice options for more different ways to build intakes. And we'll see. Maybe we'll use them next weekend. It depends on what our elements look like for the game tomorrow. I'm really excited. I cannot believe that we are less than 24 hours from kickoff. Like, it just does not compute. All right. I suppose let's start working on this robot. I think that sounds good. I've got a beeline right here. I'm going to turn this off. It needs some wheels put on. It needs some Omni wheels. It's got a drop center. It's actually using the new drop center plates instead of the older ones. So this is how you'd build it if you got a beeline today. It just needs some Omni wheels to make it a lot more stable. And then as we're kind of putting this together, we'll talk about how you can go about building a robot. I think it's going to be really nice to have both a Mecanum wheel chassis and a six-wheel drive ready for like just quickly start prototyping next weekend, because we'll be able to just start driving robots around, and like maybe we'll make some really simple mechanisms to test. Like in a lot of FTC games, you get the really simple game element, like pushing elements around on the floor. we can try that and kind of get some idea of how efficient we are at that. Just as a reminder of like what Robot in 3 days is and everything, it's pretty much what it sounds like. We have some FTC alumni come in, and they're going to work on building a robot in about 15 hours of live stream. So a lot of times you'll hear about robots in 36 hours, a robot in 1 weekend, and a lot of times they tend to run longer than us. Part of really the original, back in the day, a couple of years ago when we started Robot in 3 days at GoBuilda, we didn't start the idea just when we did it the first time. We picked 15 hours because our lapel mics could go 5 hours on a battery. At that time. Since then, they degraded, and we have new ones now, and they're hopefully a lot better, and they will run way longer. But originally, we picked 3 5-hour streams because we could run 5 hours on one battery pack, and everybody could have a battery pack and a mic, and we could go for 3 hours. I'm sure those of you who caught our stream live last year knew that that didn't hold true, and we had mics die, and we just had to replace batteries as we were going. But that's kind of the start of, that's kind of the origin of that specific timeline. This year we've sort of kept it. It's still 15 hours, but it is split up in a 4-hour day, a 6-hour day, no, a 5-hour day, a 6-hour day, and a 4-hour day. We're going from, the schedule is on the website. I don't want to say the wrong schedule. Let me just check it. We're going from 4 to 9 Central on Friday, 3 to 9 Central on Saturday, and 9 to 1 Central on Sunday. So Sunday's stream will be in the morning, Saturdays is afternoon to the evening, and Fridays is solidly in the evening. And that's kind of just to work around travel for our guests. Most of our guests are in college, so that makes it just more difficult. You've just got to work around more schedules. They are, by and large, traveling, so that'll be really fun. I'm excited for them to show up. I don't want to spoil who they are in case one of them ends up not being able to make it last minute, but they have been really successful in FTC, very good. So not only in robot performance, but some of them have been really successful at world's level awards. I think all of them have been. One of them hasn't, I don't think, won a world's level award, but I believe the other 3 have. So I'm excited to hear, that'll be a great opportunity for you guys to ask them questions about what that level of awards is like in FTC. And I think they should have some really great input, especially when you kind of get to the sense of scale of who they are. So we've got our Omni wheels on this robot. This is a great opportunity to give a quick overview of what a drop center does on a robot. I have a video that I need to shoot that I have written on this, but I think it'll be easiest to look at this from this perspective. And this is going to be easier with B-roll in a video. But let's pretend this is a 4-wheel drive chassis. And let's also pretend that this is a 4-wheel drive, all traction wheel drivetrain. So let's actually, for the sake of this discussion, I don't have a ball in, that's fine, I just want to do it. This has a traction wheel here, no wheels in the center, and a traction wheel here. Our robot, the way we would determine how fast this robot moves, for a second we're going to ignore the friction that it would take to slide the wheels sideways, is we would draw a circle, and we define that circle by putting a point right here on one wheel, another point on the circle on the next wheel, and the third point to fully define the circle on the third wheel. Now this gives us a circle of a certain diameter, and it's going to take a certain number of rotations of our motors to drive the robot around that circle. That's what I like to think of like the free speed of how quick our chassis runs. So that makes the other part of that is the amount of friction it takes, basically how much skidding there is for your robot to drive around that circle. Then those are the 2 primary ways we can affect how quick a chassis turns. We can decrease the size of that circle, basically going from a larger circle to a smaller one takes fewer rotations of the motor for the chassis to make a full rotation. In fact, making it faster when you're talking about the same ratio of motors, or we can reduce the scrub. This reduces the load on the motors, and motors with less load spin faster. So when we're looking at our four-wheel drive chassis, one of the ways we can do that is by changing 2 of those wheels to Omni wheels. That reduces the friction that it takes for the robot to turn. It also slightly affects where you're drawing the 3 points on the circle, but primarily it reduces the turning scrub. The other thing we can do is start to add wheels. We can add center wheels. So let's imagine this is a 6-wheel drive chassis with 6 traction wheels and no dropped center. You'll go about drawing that same 3-point circle, 3-point defined circle on the 4 outside wheels, but you'll also, today we're talking all about turning around the center of your robot. We'll also draw another circle that's defined by the center of your rotation. The middle outside wheel on the right and the middle outside wheel on the left. This gets you a much smaller turning circle, and you add an element of scrub there when you have 2 of your wheels are trying to turn your robot at some RPM, and the other 4 wheels are trying to spin your robot at another RPM. So you add a level of turning scrub, but by and large, you are still increasing your speed, is my understanding, I think, because you are shifting your average turning circle to be smaller. You have some wheels that are influencing your robot to turn faster and some that are influencing your robot to turn slower. You can also add Omni wheels to either, if you add Omni wheels to both the front and the back, you'll reduce the scrub a lot. Your turning circles are still generally the same, but your scrub goes down, your motors run faster, everything is a little bit nicer. Now what a dropped center does, let's imagine now these are all traction wheels and you have a dropped center. You're forcing contact with the ground on only 4 of the 6 wheels. This is where kind of the magic happens. I'm gonna switch some stuff. Oh, I need to go backwards to be in the frame. There we go. So this chassis has a dropped center, which means only 4 of the wheels can be in contact with the ground at any given time. In this case, there's more weight on the back 2 wheels. So those back 2 wheels will be those back 4 wheels will be the wheels in contact with the ground. And instead of defining our turning circle by the most extreme wheels, we're defining it only by those 3 points that are in contact with the ground. What we've done is we've shrunk our circle a ton. Now we're the same width, but we're much shorter. Let's pretend that our front 2 wheels are actually, these are the 4 wheels in contact with the ground. They're all traction wheels. That makes it simpler. Now, not only have we reduced the size of the circle, we've also reduced the angle from our wheels to tangent with the circle. This one's easier to understand with some visuals, but basically, if you've got your 4-wheel drive chassis, your wheels are 45 degrees from tangent with the circle, assuming your chassis is square. So that scrub is directly related to that angle of the wheel, from the wheel to the turning circle. You'd have no scrub at all if your wheels were mounted at a 45-degree angle, and that's one of the reasons that X-Drives just turn so smoothly. So we can imagine that on a square chassis with the 4 outside wheels, we've got that 45-degree angle, tangent angle of the turning circle compared to our straight wheels. This means that there's that amount of scrub. Now, by reducing the wheelbase length, we're reducing that angle. Now, these wheels are a lot closer to being tangent with that circle because that circle is wide and short. Now, if you went and made a chassis that is crazy long and really narrow, what you end up doing is you create you have wheels that are really far off from tangent with that circle, so you get a ton more scrub than a short and narrow drivetrain. So our 6-wheel drive has increased our turning speed in 2 very different ways, by reducing the scrub, just by reducing the length of the drivetrain, and we've reduced the size of the turning circle, basically just the amount of distance it takes for your wheels to drive around. Yes, excellent. I'm sorry. Stargamer285 just said nerd, and that's... that white paper is really sweet. That's like a great way to like dig into the actual physics, and if you want to like model your drivetrain and how it's going to work in real life, that's an awesome rabbit hole to go down. That's why we really like drop center drivetrains in FTC. Specifically, this configuration in FRC, you would call it a 4 plus 2. We're talking about 4 traction wheels and 2 Omni wheels. The theory behind this is that you put your Omni wheels on the side of your robot with more weight, so that your drop center biases your robot toward that side, and most of the time you're going to spend with your robot with 2 traction wheels and 2 Omni wheels, which reduces your turning scrub even further. So you get a really quick turning robot. If you're going to go push another robot or go climb up something where you really want that traction on from 4 traction wheels, you may want to put the Omni wheel side of your robot forward, and as you go to push that thing or climb that object, you'll rock back on your 4 wheels with a lot more traction, and you'll end up with more traction overall. That's kind of a marginal gain, I think, in the world of drivetrains. Anyway, that is our random tangent on drop centers. Like I mentioned, I'm hoping to have a video about those sometime soonish, so we'll see. Let's get this robot up and driving. I don't see why not. We've already got it mostly wired up. We've got our Y harnesses in place. In FTC, I would not recommend generally running Y harnesses on motors, just because that does add a lot more load on the motor controllers that are built into the rev hub. But in this case, it's totally fine because we've got motor controllers that are designed to handle this much current. This is the specific application where we test them. Oh, also screw plate. So we've got wire harnesses set up to our motors. We just need some motor controllers and for everything to get set up. So we'll plug in our individual motor controllers. We're basically treating this chassis as one motor on the left and one motor on the right. It just happens in real life to be 2 independent motors that give us more power. In FTC, that makes a lot of sense because we've got a very limited amount of power on the motor. So we can just only push with so much. So we'll use more motors in applications where outside of FTC, you probably would just size a larger motor. Ishwar says, as a side note, I believe Omni wheels have slightly more forward traction on tiles, but dramatically less side-to-side traction, which is needed for turn resistance when being pushed. That makes sense to me. I think that's a really reasonable thing. Basically, I think the theory is that you deform the tile in a different way with Omni wheels than you do with traction wheels. I did a little bit of testing on this. What I found is when you're comparing Omni wheels to 70A Rhino wheels, you get a comparable but slightly biased toward Omni wheel amount of forward thrust, I suppose. And when you compare it to 30A wheels, you get fairly similar results with a little bit of a bias toward the 30A wheels. But like he mentioned in the chat, the real advantage of a traction wheel is that you add a lot more resistance to pushing your robot sideways. In an environment where you're playing an FTC game with a lot of defense, that's really nice. It makes it a lot harder for your robot to turn when somebody's pushing you and for you just to go sideways. All right, so these motor controllers are 16 mil thick? No, they are 12. I should have been able to eyeball that, really. So I have 24, 2.5. I've got 26. I've got about 30 millimeters of screw. I have a receiver that's about 8 tall. I need 40s. Yeah, I need about 40 mil long screws. I'll grab a couple screws. I've got my screw plate. You could run 8 motors off one port legally with Y harnesses. I feel like I would definitely have to check the game manual to like actually. I picked the wrong length screw. To be sure, but I think that would that violate the wire size requirements? I don't think so. I think it's just called out as motors have to have a specific size. Do FTC events typically have defense? We only saw it at one of our events, and it was just in one match. It depends on your region and your level of competition. At qualification matches, like at qualifiers and league meets, no. And especially in the last 2 years, until you got to elimination matches, there was absolutely no incentive for you to play defense. You scored less points, and you overall, like, it was a bad idea. Now we're back to win-loss tie, so it makes more sense slightly. And specifically, now that we're, now I think with this specific ranking system, it makes more sense to play defense than it ever has before. Because in the previous years that we've had win-loss tie, our tiebreaker, which was very commonly used, was the losing alliance's score in every match combined. So the sum of the losing alliance score in each one of your matches. Basically what that means is if you're the undefeated team and there's another undefeated team out there, you're looking at how many points did the other alliance score in your matches. If you didn't go undefeated, say you lose one match, that one match that you lost, it's your score that's being counted, but in the rest of them, it's the other alliances. Pretty much what that comes down to is if you're after ranking really well, you don't play defense in qualification matches because it means you have more tie-breaking points. When you go up against another team that's got just more, that's also been undefeated, excuse me, it's a good idea to have more tie-breaking points, obviously, so you'll rank higher. Now, tie-breaking points is your autonomous, like your alliance's autonomous score throughout the competition. So you have your important tie-break in this point is how good were you at autonomous, and not how good was the alliance you were against. The thought with the old ranking system is this team may have won against a team who is not very competitive, in which case we should rank this other match as being worth more points. If you have a harder matchup, you should be ranked higher. The tough part is that's really hard to control in FTC, and especially as an individual team, figuring out how to make sure you rank well is really hard. And sometimes involves teams scoring for the other alliance, which, while it makes total competitive sense, isn't a very fun. It's not great. It doesn't make anybody feel good. So I think this is overall a better ranking system because it means you're ranking teams off of what they did in that they won the match and what they did in that how good was their autonomous. Why that ties back into defense is in previous years where we were using win-loss tie as our metric of ranking teams, we always had that incentive to not play defense and allow that other alliance to score more points. Now we don't. So it's just about how many points did I score on autonomous and then did I win? So you might see more defense in teleop in an end game this year than you have in the past, in qualification matches specifically. It's pretty much just as prioritized in elimination matches because you don't ever go to a tiebreaker in elimination matches. If you tie in an elimination match, you'll play another match. Let's see here. Oh, lots of discussion about running multiple motors off one port on the Rev Hub. I would say if you've got questions about it, feel free to ask Rev. They would be the source of truth on that. They'll know more about the specifics about it than I have, and they'll have tested it better. So that's always a good idea. So the other wild card as far as defense goes in FTC is how your region handles defense. You may have a region with referees that let it happen a lot, basically. And you may have a region where it's frowned upon, and you may get penalties quicker. The game manual is pretty specific about when penalties should happen for defense. But as with every time you have volunteers go referee something, there's a little bit of flexibility in how those rulings get called. All right, I've got this robot wired up. I think it should work. All right, I'm going forward and backward right. I'm turning in the wrong direction. I've got to reverse channel 1. Oh, and channel 2. No. I need to switch my motor outputs. That always confuses me. I'm sure I could sit down and like think about it harder and end up with the right result. And like, I don't know, I just need to reverse one of the motors, I think. Yes. I'll just have to reverse one of the motors. I'm just making sure my controls on my transmitter turn into what I want it to be on the robot. So I'm turning now. I'll reverse one channel. Turning in the right direction, but I'm going the wrong direction. No, I need to do more. I need to switch the outputs. I don't need to just reverse the motors. So I'll plug the motors back with correct polarity, and then I'm just going to switch which port each of my motor controllers is plugged into. We see no defense at all here in the Netherlands. It'll be interesting to see what happens next season. I'm excited. I don't know. I really don't think there will be that much defense. There we go. That's correct. I think that a lot of teams just frown upon it at a lot of events, and a lot of the times the teams who are going to play defense and are that familiar with the rules to play defense generally don't need to win most events. They can, most of the time, when you're at that level of reading the rules, you're also pretty darn good at scoring with robots. Exceptions absolutely apply, 100%. Playing good defense is a skill, is what it really comes down to, and teams that are skilled at playing defense tend to be more skilled at building robots. So I think that's one of the reasons we see less defense in FTC. But the big exception to that idea is all of FRC, where you have tons of defense robots that aren't very mechanically complex robots, but are really darn good at playing defense because they have really good drivers. So they are technically different skills, but I think there's a lot of correlation between teams who are good at building robots and teams that are good at strategy and playing defense. Well, let's put a wheel on this strafer chassis. In the chat, Jacob mentions bringing up defense rules before qualification matches start. Yeah, the drivers' meeting is a great time to talk about defense with your referees. Yeah. Oh, Abby mentioned the thing I was hoping to mention next. In FRC, one of the reasons there's a lot more defense is that they're 3v3. There's a little bit of this in FTC of the effect that I'm going to talk about next, which is basically defense makes a lot of sense when you have one robot that has a higher scoring potential than another robot. So if you are gluten-free and you're just really, really good at scoring points, I dropped the screw, and you're against another team, and that other team is just not nearly as good. That other team has incentive to play defense on gluten-free. It's really hard when you're playing defense to slow the other team down more than you slow yourself down. That's really what it comes down to. When there's a differential in the scoring potential between two teams, if they can score way more than you, it makes more sense because you don't have to slow them down as much as you're slowing yourself down, or more than you're slowing yourself down. You just have to slow them down by some metric, by some percentage. If the most you can score is half as many points as them, you can spend twice as much time playing defense as you're taking away from them and still come out even. Now, in 3v3, this happens a lot because you've got a first pick and a second pick, and then you've got your captain and your first pick, who generally are really high-scoring teams, and then you have a second pick that is a lot lower down in the rankings. In FRC, that can be like the 24th ranked team, so they generally are not as good at scoring points, and it makes more sense for them to play defense on a really high-scoring team. When recharged, oh goodness. I'd say that RR2, Rover Ruckus, is a great example of an FTC game where defense makes a lot of sense because you have a robot that is in a position where it can score more points. That's why I thought of, let's see here. That's a lot of good questions. I like talking about defense. It's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite strategy things. In the end, all of that strategy is fun and interesting to think about. But what it comes down to is the best defense is the defense that doesn't cost you time and costs them time. So if you are hitting a robot while you're driving to get your scoring element, that's a really good way to play defense because it probably isn't slowing you down much, but it's slowing them down a lot. Now, if you're sitting in front of their robot and having a pushing match, they probably will spend less time overall in that pushing match than you will. They'll get out of it, and they'll be back to scoring points sooner. And if you guys have the same scoring potential, you will probably come out even or below that other team. All right, I've got a mechanical wheel built to do a hub shaft. I've also got the gate mill bearing on it. I'm just gonna put this all together. The end game warehouse defense during MTI was also interesting. I didn't actually watch MTI finals, but I think I can imagine what you're talking about, where like a robot might go park in front of a team's access to the warehouse. That's a really great example because in that case, that team probably does not have the chance to score very many points. You're scoring points by sitting in the warehouse. You're scoring your 10 or 15 point park, and you're ideally stopping them from getting a complete park. So you are scoring your points while stopping them from scoring their points. That's a really great, that's almost hard for me to say lives in the same category as like traditional FTC defense because it's so specific. Yeah. Skystone defense is what I was trying to talk about earlier when you're like, I'm going to go check this robot on my way to get a stone. I'm just going to be in their way and throw them off their game. A lot of times that, what I would consider that good defense of like not spending a ton of time holding a robot up is almost more mental than it is anything else. Deep Space was amazing, interesting. As somebody who didn't play Deep Space or build a robot for Deep Space, I did not like watching Deep Space. It's an FRC game for people who don't know. I just couldn't stand it. There was a lot of defense, hey, having a robot completely stop another robot from scoring. Defense was great in that game, but that's hard for me to be excited to watch. There's a level of defense that's cool and interesting, but most of the time that is not what happened in Deep Space, in my experience. You might love that game, and I don't think that's an unreasonable take. I think Deep Space is pretty well liked in the FRC community. I also really liked Power Up, which is not well liked in the FRC community, so I might just have bad taste. I liked the game elements in Deep Space. They were cool. I did really like those. Those were really fun. Deep Space robots were super cool, but watching it was so bad. I didn't like watching it. But I don't know, maybe that's because I'm from FTC and like all of those robots were FRC and they really liked defense and that was what you played. I really loved, I loved Power Up. Power Up scoring, was probably awful, right? It sucks that you could get to a position as an alliance where there is literally no way for you to come back because you didn't keep the scale for long enough. And like, it's 40 seconds left and you lose, right? That always sucks. The thing that I loved about Power Up was the switch. No, the scoreboard, the power-ups, where you could put crates back to your driver's station and they could pick cool things to do with them. I loved that. That was such a fun idea. The climbs were good. Oh, the climbs were good in Deep Space. Yes, the climbs in Deep Space were sweet. Steamworks would have been incredible if gears were worth less. I think that's a fair take. The strategy part of Steamworks was that you had all of these balls. The balls were worth, I think they were 1 point apiece. And when you were good, there was no possession limit. So it was just like, how quick can you score balls? The problem was and those balls were all over the field and you shot them into a vertical, really tall goal, right? Less than 1 apiece. They were worth almost nothing. There were gears that you moved from one side of the field to the other side of the field. You could think of them a lot like Skystone, basically. And those were what was worth points. But the tricky part was you got a ranking point in FRC, basically another point on top of the primary ranking. by scoring a certain number of balls. So if you're a really good team, you have a ranking advantage by scoring balls in qualification matches, but you don't have a winning the match advantage. So there's an amount of time that you want to spend scoring balls that really aren't scoring you any points. Each ball was worth 0.3 points. Wow. All right. So that was really interesting. The other interesting thing was there was a certain number of gears on the field. You could only score so many. So once you got to a point where both alliances could score all the gears, the only thing that mattered was the balls. And then, crap, if I didn't have I could be the best gear robot in the world, but if I don't have a ball shooter and I run out of gears, I'm going to lose. So it's really interesting. I like that mechanic a ton, but it makes it so that most matches are just about the gears. If you're just trying to win, you might shoot some balls in autonomous and an early teleop, but it was score as many gears as you could. Abby also mentions that collections of gears scored points. I think there were 3 tiers of, like, you could score, I don't remember that precisely, but yeah, like you could score a gear that wasn't worth any points on its own, but once you added another gear, you got to a total number of points. All right, that strafer is running really smooth. Steamworks looked really cool, though. That was one of my favorite parts of it. It looked awesome. The hang at the end was super cool. You got to drop down your team, like your team could bring a rope, and then your robot you would drop it down at the end game, and then your robot interacted with that rope to climb up the rope. Teams ended up using Velcro a lot. You have a strap of Velcro. I think that was the loop side, and then you have a hook roller on your robot, and you run up to it, and you catch, and then your drum spins up and climbs up the Velcro. Fantastic idea. Crazy smart. But it kind of solves the problem pretty easily, so you don't get quite as many unique, cool solutions. I really liked... So let's see, each gear was effectively worth 8.3 points if you got all of them. Fuel was 0.3. 100 points in gears, and you have to score 300 balls. Yeah, that would be crazy. I think Steamworks is more interesting if you have, if you could be a successful team not scoring gears. So you might have more differentiation in teams. You might have more, hey, I am a gear robot. 148 was a really great just gear robot, if I remember right. They were amazing at it and really small and really light. And you had really great ball robots. You had robots that were great at both, like 254, you know, wins worlds because they're really good at both. But it would have been neat to see more specialized robots in that regard. Oh, it was 21.6 points per gear. Yeah, that's crazy. Steamworks was 2017. Power Up was 2018. Steamworks was the second FRC game or third FRC game I had seen. So there's definitely a kind of nostalgia for that. All right, we've got our strafer put together. We'll work on the electronics for a strafer off stream. I think it's about time. We probably should roll for our giveaway, pick our winner for our boot wheels. We're gonna send 2 boot wheels over to you. I think we should pick 2 winners. I think it'd be fun. We'll send two winners some boot wheels. That way we get more of these 40 people on the stream. If you'll go ahead and pick our winners, you can take it away, Shane.
Let's get this done. Alrighty. We are going to close the entries, and let's pick some winners.
Platypus at the last second.
Oh, good timing. Oh, looks like we got a Math Monster 25 is one of the winners. Nice. Right. Good stuff right there.
Sweet.
And Awkward Potato TV.
I think our Twitch followers, I always say this, our Twitch followers have great names. I like Awkward Potato TV. That's so fun. Like the text says, shoot us an email at marketing@goodbuilder.com with your shipping info that needs to include your name, mention what you won, and mention your Twitch name and all that stuff, and we'll send some boot wheels over your way. All right, with that, I think we'll probably let you guys go. Thank you so much for bearing through our bad internet through the start of the stream and hanging out for the second half and asking some great questions. We will see you guys on Friday at 4 Central, same time as we started our show today for Robot in 3 Days kickoff, and have a good first week of the season. See you guys.